I'm Caryl Emerson, and I'm going to introduce you to something that Princeton University is putting on for the remainder of this week. This is the first and second week in February 2012. What we've done is gone to task resurrecting Russian works of art, Pushkin, Prokofiev, pretty much, that were planned for the 1936 Pushkin Centennial and, for reasons of censorship, were never produced. The first such interesting production happened in 2007, Prokofiev's setting of Boris Godunov, Pushkin's play for Meyerhold Theater. And what we've been lucky enough to put together for this upcoming resurrection is an adaptation of Pushkin's Yevgeny Onegin for stage. This is a different theater. This is Tayerev's Moscow Chamber Theater, but music also commissioned by Tayerev of Sergei Prokofiev. So what does this mean for a university to put on something like this? What is required, first of all, is that the text be genuinely lost. Prokofiev's music was always recycled. He never lost a good tune. So when he couldn't do Boris Godunov, the Natasha music becomes, the music in Boris Godunov gets recycled into later symphonies and cantatas. In Eugene Onegin, the Tatiana music gets recycled into Natasha and War and Peace and into Cinderella. So bits of this music are familiar to people who know Prokofiev's work, but they don't know the music in connection with the project for which the music was composed. And the major task from the musical end is to bring Prokofiev's surviving shreds together and attach them to the theatrical project where they began. Again, Boris Godunov, best known, of course, in the form of an opera by Mussorgsky, but very differently musicalized by Prokofiev. We had the same problem, are experiencing the same problem with Yevgeny Onegin, well known by the world in the opera by Tchaikovsky. Prokofiev wrote music to a stage adaptation. This stage adaptation specifically highlighted portions of Pushkin's novel in verse that were not in the opera. That gave Prokofiev a chance to liberate himself from certain themes that are absolutely indispensable to the story of Tatiana and Yevgeny, big one being, of course, the letter aria in the opera. There is letter music here, but it's really swamped by other more interesting music. For instance, Tatiana's Dream is set by Prokofiev in a very scary way. Tchaikovsky was far too much of a romanticist to do that in its proper Gothic spirit, at least in that opera. And also the library scene, very important scene for the novel, is musicalized here. So what we're doing is putting on a Prokofiev-Pushkin production of Yevgeny Onegin. There's a missing link, however, and that link, of course, is the adapter. That adapter was a man now known in Russia, becoming known in America with increasingly fine circulation of his short stories and English translation, Sigismund Krzyżanowski. He worked for Tayerev's Chamber Theater from 1921 until his death, pretty much a year before his death, 1950. He died 1949. As a part-time lecturer in the acting studio, he was also employed as an adapter of plays. The first play that he adapted was A.K. Chesterton's The Man Who Was Thursday. 1924 was put on in the Chamber Theater as a spoof on spy novels. Chesterton didn't much like the adaptation, but of course he wasn't asked. Whether or not he did, it was simply put on. He also, Krzyżanowski probably advised on the first Prokofiev Chamber Theater collaboration, which took place in 1934. That was on a pastiche of Bernard Shaw and Shakespeare, with a little bit of Pushkin in between, a pastiche on the Cleopatra theme called Egyptian Nights. This was a success. Krzyżanowski wasn't credited for this. By this time he was pretty much blacklisted as a writer and as an adapter. He did a lot of work but got credit for very little. 1936, the last commission for the stage that he had as an adapter, that also was banned in 1936, early December. And it wasn't banned because the adaptation was necessarily wrong in all of its parts. It wasn't banned for the music, which was ideologically fully successful. It was banned because of a collateral crisis that the Moscow Chamber Theater was experiencing over another work of art, Borodin's light opera Bagatelle, Epic Nights, which was interpreted ideologically in a way that wasn't to the liking of Stalin and his cultural bureaucrats. So this project came to an end, not in the way that, say, Meyerhold came to an end. Arrest, shaming, death by firing squad, 1940. It wasn't sort of that type of Russian, Soviet, Stalinist tragedy. But this was another dissolution of a work of art that never really came together. What we had was a wonderful set of 44 musical pieces by Prokofiev. There was also a pretty fine adaptation by Krzyżanowski. Pushkin purists didn't like that adaptation because it was a little bit too free with Pushkin's text, changed the order of some of the scenes, got rid of the narrator, made the characters actually have to speak what they were being told to say by the narrator or thinking via the narrator. So it was a problematic play script, but fully realizable. That was dredged out of the archives, has never been published even in Russian. Translated, that's going to be part of our project. So just briefly what this project is. My collaborator at Princeton, the Prokofiev scholar Simon Morrison, found the original parts, reassembled them on the music side, also found the play script with Prokofiev's markings when he read it in April of 1936, and proposed that Princeton put it on. Very expensive to put these big things on. University can do it, while private theater probably could not. So we decided to look at these materials and see how they could be reassembled in the spirit of the chamber theater, where it was supposed to appear. But of course not tied to that, because the play and its music never got into production. It was never even officially cast, which meant that what they would have done with it when these creative components came together was unknown to anybody. What we think is that the music Prokofiev composed was simply too lush and public for the type of play that Krzyżanowski condensed out of Pushkin's novel, which was very private, spooky. A lot of it took place in dreams. So how to put big, glorious, tuneful Prokofiev music to small, private, phantasmagorical Krzyżanowskian sort of playwriting. It was a challenge, and we decided we should therefore showcase the materials in two formats, and we're doing two performances of the extant material. In one performance, in a big, airy public hall, this is going to feature the Princeton Symphony Orchestra, professional orchestra, doing Prokofiev's full incidental music, restored for the first time. And to illustrate that production, we're going to have portions of the plot dance. There'll be a Tatiana who dances out her love, her rejection, her marriage, her ultimate rejection of Onegin. That's danced with ballroom dances. There'll also be bits of the Russian text read over the orchestra. So this will be really a sound fest. Nobody except those who know Russian will understand the text. People will be able to follow what's going on with the dance movements, but it won't be a play. It'll be a different sort of realization, which highlights Prokofiev's music. But since it's personally very important to me, I've become interested in Krzyżanowski as a prose writer and as a human being, disappeared under Stalin. We're going to have that play script also fleshed out, and this takes place elsewhere on campus, at the Lewis Center for the Performing Arts. There's a tiny theater there, about the size of a good-sized gymnasium cut in half, and this little black box is going to be where all this takes place. There's only room for a piano. It's going to be Prokofiev's piano score, but every word of the actual play text is going to be there. And that really makes sense to me. It was a chamber play, and the hugeness of Prokofiev's wonderful orchestration was not realizable with the sort of private spaces we have to realize in this script. And that's a full-length play, which opens not with the first chapter of Onegin. It opens with Lemsky doing a bit of poetry over his future father-in-law's grave, Dmitry Larin, so it opens already in chapter 2 of Pushkin's novel. But other than that, pretty much follows the plot curve with major cuts. But it's a dramatic adaptation. Krzyżanowski called it a scenic projection, and he was thinking cinematographically. He doesn't have chapters, the 8 chapters. What he has is fragments, and they fade in and fade out the way a movie would fade in and out. And this is quite possible to do in a small and experimental theater. So that's happening. That'll be 6 runs, and it's opened by this orchestral dance extravaganza that will precede it. That's Princeton's contribution to Russian culture, helping her to realize now what she wasn't